Most of you know that Annette Lawrence is a Denton-based artist. She is a professor of drawing and painting at the University of North Texas. She's been in Texas since 1990, and I just want to say at the beginning, one of the great reasons for doing a series like this is to include local artists, and I'm glad we could finally include Annette. And this idea is very simple, that she's one of the reasons we should be very proud of the local art community that we have. Having said that, as far as this series is really based around the ideas of what sculpture can be and is and was and all of those things. And one of the things that I love about Annette's work is all of the sculptural qualities and themes. Now, I'm not saying it's all sculpture, that's not what I'm saying, but the idea of working with 2D and 3D and how those two work together, the idea of how she herself is actually responding to architecture, especially with the string work, which you'll see today. There's a musicality to her work, which she'll probably talk about a little bit, and she's even influenced by things like music lessons. And also what's really interesting to me is the use of very simple materials, string, packing tape, paper, even junk mail, which she'll talk about, and how she's able to use these very simple things and be very profound and very evocative with them, and speak volumes with less material in a lot of ways than a lot of artists do, and I think that's an amazing moment to think about. Her work is grounded in autobiography, counting, and the measurement of everyday life. Her subjects of inquiry range from body cycles, ancestor portraits, music lessons, and unsolicited mail, again, as she will speak about today. She grew up in Queens and Freeport, New York. She received her BFA from the Hartford Art School and MFA from the Maryland Institute College of Art. Her work has been widely exhibited and held in museums and private collections all over: the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, the Dallas Museum of Art, the Wachowski Collection, the Blant Museum in Austin. How many of you have been out to the new Cowboy Stadium? Okay. How many of you have seen Annette's work? Okay, for those of you who don't have your hand up, this is a really good reason to go to the new stadium that doesn't have to do with football, okay? Okay. This is a proud moment for this area. This is a fantastic installation. Talk about responding to architecture in one of these installations that as you walk into the stadium. And again, we're lucky to have that in here, and she has a really prominent piece there. Her work was included in the 1997 Whitney Biennial exhibition, and she has participated in artist and residency programs in South Africa, Scotland, Australia, Maine. And of course, she's represented in town by Tally Dunn Gallery. I just have to say, we're just very lucky to have her today, and thank you for so much for being here, all of you, and help me in welcoming Annette Lawrence.
Thank you all for coming. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Stephen, for that great introduction. And can you hear me okay? Okay, good. I want to just jump right into slides. I have about an hour's worth of images to show you. Feel free, as I'm going, to ask questions if there's things that you're curious about. I'm happy to just entertain questions as I go. Let's see if I can make this work. Okay. I titled this talk "The Meantime, Before Digital and After Analog," because that's the space I feel like I'm in. Not quite in one or the other, and in between both of them. And it's a little bit difficult at times. I have a lot of images that are on film that haven't been translated yet to digital. And as I was preparing this talk, I was bumping into that a lot, but I managed. So I want to give you just a little background I studied sculpture as an undergrad, and I never show these slides, but these are pieces I made as an undergraduate student. I was real interested in real formal things at the time of scale and negative and positive space. This is actually a cyclist riding up a hill going into a cave. You can see the handlebars in the front of that form. I've lived on a bicycle since I was about 5. And when I was an undergraduate student, I didn't know too much more than that, so I made work about it. Also, the way that these are constructed is reminiscent of vernacular architecture, sort of rickety but still clean. I was interested in making forms that have curved forms out of straight parts. And that happens again and again as the work goes forward. These pieces are titled carte blanche in general, and there were probably 30 or 40 parts that I could assemble in different installations. I'm also interested in the relationships between the forms and, I said scale already, playing around with the same thing in different sizes and repeated forms. I'm showing you this image because last night I watched a film called Songs of the Revolution. And this is my aunt. Her name is Willa Pardo, and she was there at the March on Washington. And her presence at that march made it possible for me to be here. So I just wanted to put that in. When I was in graduate school, it became really important for me to address African American culture in my work. I avoided it all during undergrad, but I couldn't continue without embracing that. So this piece is called Square One, and it represents the way that I experienced race relations in this country as more of an intellectual, strategic experience rather than a physical one. This piece is called Drawing from Insecure Borders. And I made it after returning from a trip to Angola in 1988. And the thing that I was interested in with this piece is to get the feel of having traveled to Africa without being too literal. I also became interested at this time in the relationship between textiles and text, and also in using text as image. And the text as image came out of, as I was looking around for representations of African American life, I found them in literature and music. I found those images and stories to be more real than what was available in the mainstream media. This is a photo of my studio space at the Maryland Institute College of Art. And these are some early text pieces. The one at the top, the type is too small to read. It says more, bigger, faster. And it's in the collection of Nasher, who I see is here. And it's about Western civilization and our obsession with more, bigger, faster. And I also, at the time, thought about it as a mantra for art students. And I'm now guilty of making my students do things more, bigger, and faster all the time. The other piece, Member Stranger, is about the tenuousness of being either a member or a stranger and how that can change from place to place and moment to moment, really. And the other flower pieces are called wallpaper. That was sort of the main thing I worked on for my thesis work. I was playing around with the idea of painting being glorified wallpaper. This is a studio in Houston at the Lawndale Art and Performance Center. I just think it's interesting to see where the work comes from. The pieces on the wall are also text pieces, but I'm using floor plans as text in those. And at the time, I was interested in text that didn't have a relationship to sound, but was still readable. Jumping forward a little bit to 1998, this work is called The 20th Century. And I made this work in South Africa, in Johannesburg, at a residency, a place called the Bag Factory. I think it's interesting how we talk about time in terms of the 20th century is the 1900s. So I literally have 1910s, 1920s, 1930s, and so on in this work. And the change from white to black is about the state of South Africa and the changes that have happened there. These are details. These are on brown paper sacks that have been opened up and joined together. And they are probably, each piece is around 2.5 feet square. This was also made into a woodcut, and there are prints around in this area of that, of that piece. And the actual, the original drawing slash painting is at the American Airlines Ambassador Club here at DFW. also in Johannesburg, I made this installation. The part of the residency was to do an exhibit at the end, and I had this big open space and wanted to make something happen in the middle of it. So I made a big brown circle and used string to sort of close it in, but not quite close it in. And the boots are boots that I wore all the time that I was there, and for several years before that. And they're there to give make a reference to a human form without being literally, having one literally present. And they show up in other pieces also. The other thing about this piece was at the reception, while people were there seeing it, a lot of people mentioned that it seemed like a beam me up Scotty machine. And it's just funny how low tech you can be and still, allude to Star Trek and sci-fi. This is one of my favorite places on the planet, and as we go forward, you'll see that it's influenced a lot of things that I've made. When I was a child, my best friend's parents split up, and her father moved to Brooklyn Heights, and we lived in Queens. And I would go with her to her dad's house sometimes, and he lived at the end of his block. If you turn the corner, the Brooklyn Bridge was there, and I remember playing and running and seeing the bridge and stopping just dead. Like, wow, that's the most incredible thing I've ever seen in my life. And my friends were like, come on, you've never seen a bridge before? And so I just, squashed my little enthusiasm and went on playing. But then when I was in undergrad and we were studying architecture, this bridge showed up. It's like, that's that bridge. I knew it was important, even when I was 8. This piece is back in Dallas at the African American Museum. It's one of the first installations I made in this area. And I was invited to do an installation in these great vaulted galleries and thought that I should just go with it rather than working against it. So I mimicked the shape of the space itself. And where you're standing in this photo is in a narrow doorway that's in a wall. So you could be on the outside of this or on the inside of it. And the top of the tallest it goes is probably 9 feet, and the arch in the middle is about 3 feet tall. So as you walked in, if you wanted to get closer to the shoes, for instance, you had to kind of stoop as you went in, and when you came back out, you were sort of standing back up again. And I was interested in that, like having people move in a different way than they would ordinarily move. And there's the 20th century again back there. This is titled Round 11. And it was part of a Project Row House Round 11. That's where the title came from. But the circle on the floor is 11 feet in diameter, and there are 11 concentric circles to make the piece. Row houses is a project in Houston in the 3rd Ward where a group of shotgun houses, a block worth of shotgun houses, were turned into art spaces. And this was one of them. The spaces are about 15 feet wide by 25 feet long. And these are homes that people actually lived in a while ago. And still, people live in spaces this small, actually, in the same community. This is a drawing of the atrium of the University of Michigan Museum of Art. And I was invited to do an installation here, but I had never visited Michigan. So I was working with just a drawing of the space that I drew from a photo. I sort of thought about the theatrical nature of the architecture in this one and went with spotlights. On arrival, that's basically what I'm working with. A roll of paper, a box of string, a gallon of matte medium, and a few tools. The first step in making that piece was to lay circles on the floor, and those are 9-foot circles, 9-foot diameter circles, and there are 9 of them. And I'm interested in this pattern. If anybody does quilting, it's called double wedding rings. while making this piece, we had somebody up on the balcony, somebody on the ladder, that's me there, and on the floor we had a few people. And in the making, we started with this center circle, which was not a good idea, because all the string had to go through that circle, that space. So in the process of making it, for about 5 days, the conversation was over this one. Which one? This one. That one? This one. As the string went from the balcony to the floor. And that was all we talked about the whole time. Here's the piece finished. It's called transparent opaque. The paper at the bottom has holes punched in it, and they're reinforced with packing tape. And there's little loops of string that the long string is tied to. And at the top, it's just tied to the posts of the railing. Yeah, brown paper is really strong. There's Velcro. There's also Velcro under it on this one. Yeah, there's Velcro. Sorry, I forgot. But sometimes I just tape it to the floor with packing tape, and it works just as well. This piece, you may remember, was at the Dallas Museum of Art in 2000, and it's called Concentrations 36. This photo gives you the sense that there's a lot of space around the circle with the vertical lines, but there was only about 4 feet between those horizontal lines over there, these horizontal lines, and these vertical lines. So there wasn't a lot of architectural detail to respond to in this particular space. So I'm dealing with the height of the ceiling and the length of the walls, and making a piece that feels like you can see the whole room, but you can't get to it. And that was the thing I was trying to make happen, where you were confined, but not, you were physically confined, but not visually. Here's some details. And if you notice the paper attached to the wall, this is the piece where I sort of came up with that as a system for making installations. And it's a piece that's sort of part of an I-beam, half of an I-beam, I'd say. And 2 parts are glued to the wall, and there's a piece sticking up in the middle. And that has punched holes, and the string gets tied to that. I can just call those paper supports. This is a detail of the circle. It's the same one that was in round 11. It's having a debut, or no, what do you call that? The second time. A revival, yeah. And I liked how the knots look like vegetation in this one. And the vertical lines have a reference to a storm. So, trudging along, this is 2003. The Glassell School, I was invited to do a piece there. And this is a floor plan of that space. As you can see, it's sort of a hallway. You go in one door, walk through, go out the other door. And I needed to make something that wouldn't interfere with the traffic in that space. So I chose to work in the narrow space. You could see here, that little bit of concrete is what I attached the paper supports to, and just worked in that narrow space. It's about 21 inches. But inside of this area in here is where the piece lives. It was 3 circles, again, concentric circles. The smallest one is 6 feet, and it's 9 feet and 12 feet. And I had to basically make this piece on the floor and then transfer it to the top of the wall. And here's the first circle installed, and it wasn't until this part of the piece was done that I knew I could actually do the work. And I just did it again 2 more times. It's a snapshot of the finished piece. This is called Theory. The fact that one was 6 days of very long days between Christmas and New Year's of 2003. I worked with one helper on this one consistently, and other people came in and out. But the guy who worked with me was on the maintenance crew at the Glassell School of Art, and he was not a talker. And so it was a quiet installation, and, and we communicated a lot by, like, you know, in order to know which string he was using, we would just go by feel. He'd pull on one, and I'd pull on it to make sure it was the same one, and then I'd tie my side, and he'd tie his side. There's a few more sets. I'm sorry?
Installations, have you ever run into one where the tension all of a sudden started giving after you finished and then held on it like longer?
You know, they're usually temporary, so that might happen if they were up longer with the string and with temperature changes. But in a 3-month period, the tension has been able to, you know, it stays. This is looking directly up at the piece, and this is a professional photographer's shot of the piece. It's by Paul Hester.
Have you ever had it filmed?
A little bit, yes. My friend Bernstein Sigley actually. The films haven't been finished, but there's footage. There's a lot of footage. We can work with you on that. This is, I think, one of the last installations in this group. But I did this in January of 2010 at Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia. And in this one, I wasn't responding to the space so much as I was the area. These have a feeling of like crab traps or lobster traps or that kind of feel, or something nautical. And just have a couple of images of it. When I was a kid, as I was making this work, so I'm going to go back a bit, I remembered that I had this miniature lobster trap. Our family used to go on vacations in Maine and Vermont and just north of New York, and I had this little lobster trap toy that I was completely obsessed with, and it's showing up here. This piece is called 95, and this is actually the 4th installation of it. It has had a life of in test site in Austin, the home of some collectors in College Station, an installation at Betty Cunningham Gallery in New York, which you'll see in a minute, and this one. And it's a random piece, but it's organized. I can show you better. It starts out just balls on the floor. And this is the string that, all the string pieces I just showed you, this is the string that made those pieces. And in 2004, I stopped using this particular string. So actually, the last piece at ODU was not this string, because it was hanging on the wall in that space. But I like that the history of all those pieces is in these balls. And at Betty Cunningham Gallery, I did just a horizontal line on the wall. It's a really large wall. And then I had the staff of the gallery and myself and other people who were helping me roll balls on the floor. And we used 2 lines two lines in the actual flooring itself in the stone to determine a space that was the legitimate space. And then wherever the balls landed when they were rolled on the floor, we hung them on the wall in the coordinating spot on the wall. So that's how this has been installed each time. So each time it's different. This one, this is the Betty Cunningham installation. And it was in this piece, like looking at this, where I realized that my drawings, which I'd been making all along, I'm just not showing them to you in this talk, but started to overlap with the installation. And that happened in a body of work called Theory, these drawings, that I did based on my music lessons when I was 7 and 8 years old. I found that I was really more excited about the theory homework of drawing and writing the music out than I was in playing, because my teacher's emphasis was on making sure I could read and write and not so much listening, and it was really difficult for me. So I just got involved in the visual part. And I quit after 8 months. But this is 27 years later. I found the book, the actual notebook from that time in my mother's piano bench. And I had been interested in using music as text in the work. So when I found that book, everything kind of came together. I was interested in making drawings that looked like music sounds, and also to kind of give a sense of motion in a still image. This is I was using cardboard to make houses and things and blocks. And when I started taking art lessons, I was given real art materials. So for a while, I used pastels and acrylic and all those things, paint and stuff. But I gravitated back towards things that are readily available when I was able to choose my own material. This is 95 at Dunn & Brown Contemporary, which is now Tally Dunn Gallery. A couple of details. It's the same as Betty Cunningham, except with the vertical line and a lot wider playing area for the rolling of the balls. These are the paper supports the way they ship. So they just ship as these kind of curved flat things. And when I saw this image, where I saw them in the box, I was like, oh, I like that. And I was really interested in the edge of this. So that sort of kicked off a whole big body of work. This is a drawing of a list of a stack of lists. I keep these lists all the time, and I just got interested in all kinds of edges. And I want to tell you a story about when I was about 10, I think, 9 or 10. I went to day camp at Flushing Meadows Park. It was this free police athletic league camp, and one of the activities for the kids in that park was one day we went and made pinhole cameras at the Queens Museum. And while we were waiting for the paper inside of the oatmeal containers to catch an image, we spent time inside of the museum, and there was a Laurie Anderson exhibit when she made sculpture. And I remember standing in front of this really big book, and I probably am this big, and the book was this big. And there was brown kind of worn corners on one side. And the idea was to turn the pages. So I turned a few pages, and there's nothing on the pages. It was blank. And so I realized, oh, the whole idea is just this turning of the pages. That's the work, And I just remembered that forever and ever. And it was one of the, I think, I don't remember seeing an art exhibit prior to that that had that big of an impression on me. So this is where I start using my junk mail as material. Just wanting to see stacks of paper, I think, is the impetus. And in this work, this is an exhibit called Edge. This is also at Dunn & Brown. Those stacks are not attached. They're just loose paper stacked on top of each other. So if a strong wind blew through the gallery, it would just be everywhere. And after showing them that way and realizing that the precariousness of that was probably not the best plan, it's called July through October 2005 is the name of this piece. I decided to actually save the mail and be a little more organized about it. So I saved it this way. I just made stacks and labeled them. And then this is kind of a raw stack. That's November of '05. And this is what I made out of November of '05. But this stack is actually bound on the back. So it's fixed. And I went through the whole year. Actually, I did 13 months because I like the lunar calendar better than the solar one. This is November here, December there, and then January, February, March, April. May is the smallest month. I don't know why. There's less junk mail in May, but that's how it worked out. And it goes all the way around, back to November. I was really interested after making these in this light line that goes down the center of them and how figurative they are, and also how they reference ancient architecture. And just the surface itself was the thing I was really interested in. So they're three-dimensional things, but I'm really interested in the two-dimensional surface of them. And they start to remind me a bit of the early work back from when I was an undergrad. And as I was making these boxes that are tailored per stack, I was like, this feels so familiar. Why does this feel like I've done it before? And it's because 20 years earlier I was making those other pieces. This is how they look in the boxes. The boxes took on their own life. I got really excited and interested in them. So, you know, I forgot about the stacks and was just making boxes for a while. This whole experience was about a 2-year period. And after the boxes, so these are the patterns that I used to draw the shapes to make the boxes. And this one was clear patterns, and these are called brown patterns. I think of these as drawings, even though they're sort of 3D things. But then I wanted to make real drawings, and I decided to do rubbings of the stacks. And I forgot all about the stacks and the boxes, and only cared about the rubbings. They took 15 minutes to make these, and it was 2 years in the making. It took 2 years to get to the 15-minute piece. This piece is called Paper Surface Circle. And it's a collection of brown paper bags that I collected over a year. So it represents a year also. And everything sort of has something to do with time. This represents 1 year too. It's a 10-foot in diameter circle. I've forgotten how many bags it is. But you can see where, that's one bag and it's connected to that bag. So just multiply. Again, the interest I have in textiles and text and the relationship between them just kind of shows up here again. This is from 2006, I think. In 2007, I traveled to Scotland, one of the residencies that Stephen mentioned. This project was called the 3 Isles Artist Workshops. And a workshop is like a resident, what we would call a residency is called a workshop there. I was really interested in these stack stone croft houses that were abandoned. And on the small island that we stayed on for 3 weeks, there were 20 artists, 10 from Scotland and 10 from the rest of the world. There were probably 15 of these buildings. So I kind of adopted this one, mainly because of that window. And I thought if I cleared all the overgrowth out of the house and was able to look through the window, then I'd be inspired and something would happen in the house. But what I didn't expect, this is the view from the window, and these round things are salmon farms. And this is the boat that's the only way to get to the island, that boat. So there's no cars or anything on it, it's just lush and green. Anyway, the fireplace kind of caught my attention. After I cleared it out and discovered there was a fireplace there, I decided to use, this is all the stuff that came out of the house, for fuel to make a fire. So it comes back in and it becomes, integral. And fortunately, the chimney worked. And it didn't smoke us out. The smoke went up and out. And the fire got quite large and was kind of jumping through the stones and out the top of the chimney of this building. And people who lived on the mainland very close by saw this fire and they were like, wow, what are they doing over there? And the owner of the island told me that this chimney and this fireplace probably hadn't been used in 100 years. And it was cause for celebration. All the artists gathered. It was early on in the residency, so we hadn't actually done anything together. So this fire sort of bonded us in a good way. And I left after a while. This is probably about between 11:30 and midnight. And you notice the sky is light because the sun never went down because it's so far north. They stayed and drank whiskey and told stories and sang songs into the morning. And jumping forward to the recent work called Coin Toss that's at the Dallas Cowboys Stadium. This is the sketch that I made based on dimensions that I was given. And there's a model of it. I called the piece Coin Toss because I wanted to connect it to football, and that action of flipping a coin to start the game appealed to me, and it also, it references a circle spinning through space. Inside of the walls lives these big steel things, because each point on the stranded cable on each side is about 200 pounds of tension. So we had to get in there and build steel armature so that the walls wouldn't be pulled down by the piece. And this is the first piece that I made where I didn't actually fabricate it myself, and I made a transition from string to stranded cable, which is pretty close to string. I thought you all might be interested in seeing these in-progress shots, since many of you will actually see the piece. And it's the only permanent installation that exists of my work at the moment. You can change that. So you see how it's going on. There's the sheetrock has the holes in it where those spots are where the turnbuckles that hold the wire are going to be attached. And I'm showing you these to just give a sense of scale. And the crew that made this, pardon? The height is 33 feet. The width of the wall is about 16. The circle itself is 14 feet in diameter. And it starts at 12 feet from the floor. Well, yes. I did the piece and then I titled it. And I feel like that it finishes itself. Visually you could kind of go there. So the motion is around the wall, on the wall itself, and flipping through space. Yeah, this one has turnbuckles. So, actually in front of the wall. Let's see if there's a better shot of it. Well, these. Okay, I'll go back a little bit. Yeah, see there? These turnbuckles are sort of nautical, beautiful turnbuckles, and they do tighten them occasionally.
Do you feel like you lose something without having the knots there earlier?
It's much cleaner. Those are missing, but I think I'll continue to make string pieces, so we'll have the knots. But when it moves to a permanent installation, I don't know material that I can get that with. No, that doesn't ball up very well.
Was it a thrill to see such a massive effort, materials, and people with machines, executing the concept?
It was, yeah. It was a pretty big deal. And it still is. And every time I see it, I'm just like, wow, that's mine.
How long did it take to resolve?
The cable part took about 8 hours. The whole process, from the first phone call from Lisa Brown to completion, was 4 months, which is very short for a piece like this. And it was on a fast track because the stadium was opening and they wanted this piece up. I have a picture of the crew. Oh, this shot is from a lift. And unfortunately, we can't see it this way, but I'd like to make something that you can see from this perspective eventually. This is my favorite image. Yes? They love this piece. The question was, how did Jerry Jones and Gene Jones feel about this work? They were really excited about it and expressed to me every time I see them how much they like it. Yes. Right. Yes. Pevsner, the architect. Namgabo, yes. Love them. Well, I love him and him. I'm not as familiar with Pevsner. This is the crew. That's Abel right here, and I don't know the other guys' names, but they were amazing. When you walk in the stadium, there's a big glass wall sort of before you. And if you don't look up, you won't see the piece, but if you look forward, you'll see the reflection like this. And this is it looking back. And from the outside at night, and from across the stadium with a huge zoom lens. Is that.
Since the cable's so thick, I mean, you can see it, and it holds the space for the yarn, you know, you have to really search for it. So you're getting a different.
Yeah. The metal is also reflective, so it's kind of giving you a little bit more. Okay, this is a sort of a jarring change, but I want to go back to when I was talking about using text as image and talk a little bit about this body of work, which many of you in Dallas are familiar with, but it's called Drawing Blood. And this piece is actually in the collection of John Rioch. This is work that I used the dates of all of my menstrual cycles that I happen to have because my mother told me to write down the first and last day of each period, because when you go to the doctor and you're a woman, that's the first question that you get. So it's kind of a stretch, and I had no intentions of ever using this text, but because I was using text as image, and I happened to have this body of text, and I was with a friend at a workshop called the Moon Blood Workshop in New York once, and the facilitator of that workshop recommended that we keep a record of our cycles in a circle. And this was sort of an epiphany moment for me. I thought, I have all of them. I have the whole record. I could do a lot of drawings with this. And so I did. For 9 years, I made drawings like this. This is also, this particular piece, I was thinking about the Yoruba symbolism of the world being in two halves of a gourd, the material and the spiritual. And also that is the I Ching symbol for receptivity. That was from 1994. Jumping ahead to 2009, I stopped using that text and stopped making those drawings in 1999. And then in 2008, I thought I should revisit just the text. And this is called a long drawing. I wanted to see what all those dates look like in one long line, since I'd been drawing them in tight spirals for all that time. So this is called the long drawing, and it's about 29 yards. No, actually. You know, I never remember when the doctor asked me. I'm like, details of this. I'm interested in how sort of structural this is, even though it's a drawing. And also the way that analog material is linear, but is stored in circles and spirals. Back to that analog digital thing. More details. Something will happen with this. I don't know what yet, but this is sort of what I'm working on now. After making that long line of that was actually on a counting tape. I thought I'll make my own paper line. Since paper doesn't come in long lines like this, like good paper anyway. I build a line myself. So I tore strips of paper, and I tried making a line that didn't work as well as I wanted it to. So this is all that paper that I tore while I was in Melbourne, Australia. I went to Melbourne on a Dozier grant from the DMA. And the title of the piece, the title of the proposal I made was Yesterday, Tomorrow, because when one is in Australia and you call back here to the United States or Texas, it's always yesterday. And the person in Texas is speaking to tomorrow. This is in Adelaide, Australia. Worked with a group of artists at the Experimental Arts Foundation. And the piece, the title of the show happens to be Gone in No Time, Gone in No Time, which I didn't make that title. It just worked out that it goes with my theme of life. And there was about 6 weeks or 8 weeks of rotating artists who worked in the space and used the space kind of as a studio. And whatever came is what came. So since I was working with this line of dates, I wanted to see what it looked like drawn on a wall all the way around the gallery, and I drew it right about eye height for myself. So because it's at my eye height, it sort of relates to my body. And it went around for about 49 yards on this time. But these aren't great slides, but you can kind of see it going all the way down and turns the corner. This is behind the wall that separates the gallery from the sort of the workspace. But I just thought I'd keep it going right across the doors and all the way to here. And it was a fun project because there was no pressure. It was, you know, we were supposed to just try things in that space. This is the bank building that we did a project called Modern Ruin. It was curated by Thomas Fulmer and Christina Reese. It's on Greenville, near Lover's Lane. It was a Washington Mutual bank that never got used, except for this project that we did. It was demolished before it ever had a life, and now there's a chicken joint standing in this space. So I drew the line again, the same line of dates, this time across glass and metal and around the sheetrock. And I don't have a lot of slides of it, but just this one detail, a photograph taken by Kevin Zadora. And this is the first time I saw it in a transparent space. This is what happened to the building a few months later. Maybe not even a month, maybe 6 weeks later. And the most recent opportunity for me to draw this line was in December of 2010, here in Dallas at the Fairmount Hotel. It was part of the Visual Arts Network, which is part of the National Performance Network, which met here in Dallas, and the meeting was hosted by Vicki Meek at South Dallas Cultural Center. This is a regular standard Queen hotel room. The line went around it 3 times. It's 30 years of dates. And I couldn't really use the walls directly, so I had to do a lot of research to find really low-tack tape that I could attach to the walls and then peel off. And I saved it as I deinstalled it. And if you go to the African American Museum today, you'll see the piece as a long line in an installation there that opens on August 11th. Details here. I was interested in how the decades almost lined up exactly, but not quite. They're just a little off. 85, 95, 04. And here again, 91, 2001, and 2010. This is the image I used for the invitation to that show. We're getting close to the end now. This is my current studio space in Denton. I'm working on a project that's very text-oriented. It's scanning all of my journals for the last 25 years, well, really between 1983 and 2007, but day by day. So today, I do July 23rd and look at whatever entries I had for this day, which I'm going to show you a couple of in a minute. I mean, those are the journals. This is a chart that I keep as I'm scanning the journals, just so I don't get lost. I just do the dates across the top and the years down the side, and the check marks are days that I have entries, and the dashes are days that I don't. And you can see, like at the bottom of that one, there's 13 entries on August 27th, and 10, and 16, 11. The smallest number I found is 4, and the highest number I've found is 17. This work is about counting, and here is a page from 1996 where I was having a studio visit with Jacob Lawrence, and he gave me his address, and that is his handwriting. And same thing today. day in 1997, I wrote this, and I'll read this to you. 10 years ago, I plunged into African American culture with a vengeance. My formal education had not covered any of what I needed to know about artists like myself. So I read Langston Hughes, Jean Toomer, Wallace Thurman, Zora Neale Hurston, Jimmy Baldwin, Lorraine Hansberry, Audre Lorde, June Jordan, Alice Walker, Angela Davis, Assata Shakur, Toni Morrison, Octavia Butler, anthologies of writing by black feminists, gay and lesbian coming out stories, biographies of Miles Davis, Stravinsky, Count Basie, Duke Ellington, and others. I attended film festivals of black independence, learned a lot through the documentaries there, saw as much live music as possible, and found out who I was through the works of these artists, learned the legacy I was a part of. I am grounded. And then I have a quote by Frantz Fanon. Because it is a systematic negation of the other person, and a furious determination to deny the other person all attributes of humanity. Colonialism forces the people it dominates to ask themselves the question constantly, in reality, who am I? That's Frantz Fanon from The Wretched of the Earth. Just happens to be July 23rd. That's why you got that. If it was another day, there'd be something else. This is what the journals look like. That's also July 23rd. So I'm thinking of these photographs of stacks as portraits of the days, those checklists as also portraits of the days, and then the actual writing in itself, which most of it is not worth reading. Just a few things actually are. That is my last slide. And I appreciate your attention. Thank you. So I'll take a few questions. Yes.
I'm really fascinated by this aspect of the ephemeral and repurposing. And part of me, when I see that you use the string that had been used in other installations and then follow it up and use new ones, that kind of residue of that initial installation is constantly evolved.
Right. All the energy and all the hands.
Do you think of it the same way, or is it?
I do. I think those balls are really charged with all that history. Yes, sorry. When I'll get to you in a minute.
I teach art and we weave a lot, and materials are always different things. But anyway, so the kids are not allowed to throw the yarn if it's long enough to tie knots, and so they tie these pieces together, and they make what we call scrap balls. Well, it's always been cool because when you weave with them, you see the changing of the temperature, changing the color and the knot, which you love. But at the same time, you got to erase who can make the biggest scrap ball. Well, 3 boys started taking scraps home, and they made this weave ball huge. It was almost the size of a softball. But their dog got over it because it was jealous of the attention that you put into that ball. So immediately it was like, don't leave it out there. Well, I've now got seriously like this big balls that the kids, but it's amazing if we teach our children what can come from the professional. It's amazing. And I referenced earlier to you about the amount of trash in South Dallas. And I kept telling the kids there's this amount of trash that fits for time. And they didn't believe it. And now they've driven by it and they come back as homeless with tears every time it's gone by it and find this in there. It's so upsetting. So thank you for encouraging me to use and focusing on what is.
Thank you.
Here's why Willa is so great piece of and one is like, why the reason why you did not those arrangements.
Well, part of it is just logistics. When I'm invited to do a piece, it's usually for a period of time, and I'm actually very okay with the theater aspect of it. It goes up. It's kind of like a circus. It goes up, it happens, it comes down. And that's really why. It's because of the venues that I've been invited to do them in. They're always temporary spaces. You know, all the way in the back there. Yeah, I haven't really. You know, I would consider working with the composer to create a specific thing for a specific piece. So, yeah. So yeah. Right. It was more structural. It was more, it'll stand up if I do it this way. It will fall down if I don't. And yeah, it's called free paper, that whole thing. And free paper is sort of a play on the fact that the paper is actually free. I haven't, but that's a good idea. Yeah. Perfectly. I tear them with a metal ruler that's 2 inches wide, so all the paper is torn by hand, and it gets stacked up. That's how it gets to be. It looks like a cross section of something. Yeah. Yes.
First, documenting your menstrual cycle, is that the first time that you began this sort of systematic?
Like record keeping.
Yeah.
Probably. That as I was doing it, I'm not thinking about it. It takes 2 seconds to write down a date. I just formed the habit because of what my mother said, and then later on, because I was using text as image, made the connection. Like, I have this text I can use. So, and I guess and then thinking about time, I think of I've always thought about time from being a small child. I always thought that the school week should be 2 days, and the weekend should be 5. I thought that when I was 10. You know? No, I thought, what's the matter with everybody else? They don't get it. Yes. Well, it's a big commitment of space, you know, to say this is going to be permanently here.
Yeah, and I had seen other things in that space, and I said, no, this.
This should stay here.
But if we made a large impression on the time, and I tried to remember, and so far, which you should have said, because I kind of described it here. And now they can see it. So what I've been trying verbally to give them a visual image, and it's just
Thank you. Yes, Karen.
Do you know what you're going to do with the journals? They can be organized in
Yeah.
so many different ways. You know, all of the like
That's the plan right now, is to do like each day all together, but I have no limitations on it. Once it's digital, I'm just going to play with it and see. I've thought about seasons. I've thought about you know, other sort of artificial ways that we. The first day of school, right? Every year of my life, my birthday, right? Yeah. I don't know. It's early still. Yeah, well, I'll keep you posted. I'm scanning all the journals. It's like, that's what I'm doing till the end of September. I should be finished by September, like before October. Yes. I'm scanning them with a wand scanner. It's a great tool. Yeah. Yes. I see it.
Thought about transitioning to digital journaling?
No, you know, I like to write, and it's very, you know, sitting in front of a computer is so not something I enjoy, you know. So it's going to have to continue to be. I guess I could sit with my laptop in my comfortable chair. I could write with a digital pen. Ah. Yeah.
As to your book is now secure, do you have a web page or something that you accumulated in the book to keep as a reference for people to see as you are in conference?
I do. I have a website. It's AnnetteLawrence.net. And I also have lots and lots of images, you know, on film and digital images now. But I've been recording my work since I was about 14. So, you know, no one will ever see this stuff pre-college. but it is recorded photographically. Yeah. Yes. No, I haven't, not specifically, you know, but I've done a lot of reading about simplicity, and I used to study the I Ching daily. So a little, you know, sort of, but not directly. Sure. All right. You've been awesome. Unless there's another question. Oh, sorry. I'll get it later. Thank you.